Hi, I'm Summer Kennard, author of Such is the Kingdom, A Practical Theology of Disability, and the forthcoming Accessible Church School, Incarnational Practices for Participating in God. Now, every week I get emails from some of you parents asking me how to help your kids stay in church. So today I'm going to show you a few different options. I'm here in our church nursery at St. Paul Antiochian Orthodox Church, where we have a little accessible prayer corner for the toddler set. And I'm going to have my son help me with the very first basic thing. It's actually the second thing. The first thing I need to tell you is this. Don't be embarrassed by your kids. Just make a decision to never be embarrassed. Don't be offended if people are distracted. It takes a lot of work to cultivate awareness without being distracted. So if you need to look around, if you're in a new church, you need allies to help you understand your kids who have special needs in church, look for the moms with a whole lot of kids because they will probably have cultivated awareness without distraction. Also, talk to your priest. That's one of the first things you should do. And see if there's a deacon, a priest's wife, Sunday school teacher, Sunday school director who might be able to help you. What you really want, though, is that sense of awareness without distraction, because that's what you're cultivating in your prayer life, too. Your children are wanted by God, and He made them the way they are, and He called them to come to church. So when we start with that assumption, we're not going to apologize for them being there. We're going to ask for help instead. So given that, that's your first set. That's social. Now, whenever you're in a pew, I think you probably know this, but I'm just going to tell you just in case. I'm going to have my son come and help me demonstrate. You want to do this method where you corral whoever needs to move around between two bookends. If you were there alone with your kids, try to find one of those moms of lots of kids, especially they probably have awareness without distraction. You might also find an older person who's good at this, a school teacher. There's a lot of people. Definitely in any parish, there's several people who can do this, who can be there with you and be present and not distracted. So you're going to want to book in the two parents and or a parent and whoever else is able to be there with awareness and not distraction. So my son's going to stand in for the other bookend. And as you see, what we would do, he's going to go to the other end. So you see, he's going to stand right in front of the dark blue chair. Nope, like you're going to sit in it. Okay. So then if we were going to be in church, we would have whoever was really wiggly be in between us. Why? We can catch them if they try to run off, but also that gives them a buffer zone. And you could do cool things. Thanks. You could go ahead and sit down now. Thank you. You could do really cool things whenever you have a buffer zone. Like you can bring one of these soft memory foam bath mats and set it on the ground so that your child can have a seat during the long service if they need to. At our church, we actually have a stack of these at the back, so any kid can take them in and set them down. And it's a nice way to help them have a little space, whether they're standing, because their feet are going to get sore more quickly, or sitting down on the floor. Okay, so maybe you've seen my old video, which was a church bag for really young kids. And I still recommend those things. A visual schedule is great, but I'm going to show you today some of the options of like a younger kid and then aging things up. Because what I'm getting now is a lot of questions from parents whose kids are, between 10 and 15, something like that. So these noise canceling earmuffs, the ones that are passive so they don't cost a whole lot. These, we have a lot of them. We actually keep 3 pairs in the pew where we usually sit in church. I have a few pairs in my Sunday school class, and we have some pairs in our church bags. So every Sunday, we're carting or have access to several pairs, so anyone who needs them can have them. Sometimes, even if you're really used to a service, maybe the priest changes which type of bell is going to be rung, or maybe there's an extra loud song. You never know, and so you want to have some ear protection. Also, people with really sensitive hearing may just need to have, extra hearing protection some days. So that's still good. Also still good are some, really like light filtering sunglasses. They don't have to be the dark ones. They can be things like this where they just sort of filter out some of the light with either blue or pink or whatever, these sorts of simple things. The classic fidget spinner, but with the update of having the poppy things, These particular ones are not very loud. So that's as loud as it gets. Like I'm trying to make noise with it, okay? That's not too bad. If you're in a very, very live sanctuary, you may not want to do the pop ones. But basically, these are not very loud, and they're not very distracting if you're around people who cultivate awareness, not distraction. They're also less loud on the floor on this rug. So another thing you might want to try are the silicone spike bracelets. They're little slap bracelets. They give a lot of stimulation, tactile stimulation for kids who need it. Then the next thing you're going to do, if you have a kid who likes to wiggle, 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 and you've already done your buffer zone with the 2 bookends, you're going to need to give them things to pull and things to push. So one of the things they can pull and push is the ground. They can sit down on it. They can lay down. But I'm going to get to some more heavy work things in a minute. For simple things, you could use these silicone stretchy bands. The thicker ones can be a little bit more expensive, but they're more fun too. And they don't make noise very much, and that's as loud as they get. And it doesn't really hurt when they pop. There are these really cool spinner toys now that we really like. They are very quiet. They can make a little noise if they fall on the ground, but not too much. So those are nice. Something that my godmother showed me, she's a chief chanter at her parish. She takes the ends of prayer candles that were in the bottom of the sand and takes the wax and melts it in her hands during the long psalms and chanting. And she goes through and warms it and then turns it into little balls. So you can give people beeswax to mold, like old prayer candles, or just Stockmar makes beeswax for molding, things like that, if you have Waldorf supplies. If you have younger kids, you probably already know about board books, having those. But what you may not know is bringing books to church is still a good idea for older kids. So I'm going to show you some to do. But let me go through, forgot to tell you about the things to squeeze. My favorite tool for squeezing is Model Magic. It is not Play-Doh, it's gluten-free. And unless you really work really hard to rub it into a rug and intentionally try to squish it into it or into fleece, those 2 things can sometimes be a little permeable. Casually sticking it to stuff doesn't stick, to clothes, to anything, okay, hair. So this is why we like to use this. It dries out every couple of weeks if you keep it in a stasher, so you'll need to buy more than one, but you can buy giant class packs of this, keep it on hand. It's really wonderful. You can have any kind of little squishy, cute toy that doesn't make noise. It doesn't have to be one of those gigantic foam squishies. This is a little Beanie Boo guy, I think, little hedgehog. So it can be cute and it doesn't make a lot of noise whenever it falls. For kids who are able to start moving into a prayer rope, you can have a prayer rope. This one happens to be wood. I brought it because that's about as loud as it gets. So don't be afraid to use these. And if you have a wool prayer rope, they're very quiet. They also make rosaries that are made out of silicone beads for kids who need to chew, or just for kids who have more trouble with fine motor skills, so they may want to go through and touch something that's larger. So these are really nice option. Again, I'm not dropping the cross, but I dropped this end of it. They don't make a lot of noise. Now, whenever you're moving into older kids, you can still bring books, but you may want to do different books. For instance, drawing paper. Maybe when they're little kids, you just find any old scratch paper and let them draw, or any old kind of coloring page. But when they're older, they're more mature. So bring them some real art paper that's really smooth and has a good texture, and give them a pen and let them draw. Maybe ask them to draw some of the things they hear in this service, like angels, Jesus. See what they think. There are unicorns in the Bible too, so there you go. Another thing is, don't forget journals. Sometimes kids may want to do some writing in their books and may want to do something like this. So get a really pretty one. Why am I saying pretty? Because it's church. So save your best for church. Like, make it really pretty. The other thing that you can do for heavy work is get a book bag. Now, I say this, and my book bags are all tote bags these days, but you can get a messenger bag or a backpack and fill it with heavy books of a certain type. Instead of little kid books with little kid pictures, you can age up by putting in real artworks. Like, this is a Getty collection of Christian art, and it's very heavy. Art books, in case you didn't know this, are always on really heavy quality paper. And because of that, even though they're not very big, they weigh more than a pound a piece. So this book right here weighs about 2 pounds, even though it's not very big. It's the size of an average paperback. And an average paperback weighs less than a pound, but this one's more than twice that. So there's lots of options for this. You can make it particular to your tradition. So this is medieval wall paintings. This is from England and Wales. This is something we like because I'm in a parish that uses that style of iconography. I also want to show you some books that are not specifically religious, but that will build attention towards the faith. So let me grab these. Oh, this is also a religious book called Books of Hours. Books of Hours were a really big deal for about 500 years. So if you want to try to find some of these fancy art books, this is the place to bring them for older kids. Let them read them in church. Carrying really heavy books gives them deep pressure and will help them feel calm and centered. That's why we're doing this. Okay, so if you have like a kid that's between board book age and older age, try to find the prettiest book you can. Like I like this book, A Taste of Paradise by Catherine Boger-Hyde, because it has a lot of beautiful pictures of saints and animals. So you get into that 3rd to 5th grade age when the kids love animals. And this is a really good one, right? Just go with their interest a bit. But I also like to include books of mazes. Why? Because Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. So literally, I put mazes in every week because I want them to associate mazes with church because you find your way there. So that's a little tangential, a little bit lateral thinking, but it's another thing that I like to include in church bag for if a kid really needs help focusing, they need something that will take a lot of their attention in. And they're still associating the feelings of finding their way with church. So it's still a win long term. The other thing I have, this is just 2 examples. I have a lot of books that are house themed or home themed. And this one is called A Place Called Home by Kate Baker, illustrated by Rebecca Green. And it's a lift the flat book. So this is nice. I also have, currently it's in our church where we're having a vigil, so I can't go in there and get it without disturbing people. I have a pop-up house book that you tie the little ribbon and make it pop up on the floor. So sometimes whenever my kids are at a long service, they'll even open that up, particularly in Holy Week services, and they might play with a home in church, and then they're associating home with church even more. Here's another one that's just a pretty one that has a lot of houses in it. Farmhouse by Sophie Blacknell. And this is a Caldecott book. Caldecott. So, you know, you don't have to bring boring paper that's just black and white, colored in. You can bring beautiful art journals. You can bring beautiful books, picture books, and also mazes and art books. Those are some of my suggestions, and I think if you use those, you'll find that it's a lot easier to come and stay in church. So don't forget the very simple thing of giving a kid a hug and rubbing their back. That's also helpful. But above all, let them know that you love them, you're glad they're there, and that you're not embarrassed. Thank you very much, and I hope that these things help.